any of you heard about possible events coming to America on or about November 4th, 2017? And as of the release of this video, November 4th is about a week away. Next Saturday, matter of fact. Now, if you haven't heard, this is what I have discovered. I don't normally like to polarize with political rhetoric or political correctness or any of that nonsense. I like to report facts and discuss content as it is without a bias one way or another. However, we are all equally susceptible to some level of bias, whether we like it or not. I tend to lean a little conservative/libertarian, but I can see things on a liberal side too. Being that as it is, the first event I want to speak of is something that I just learned about not that long ago. If you go to a website called refusefascism.org, refusefascism.org, it's explaining that on November 4th, 2017, we will gather in the streets and public squares of cities and towns across this country. At first, many thousands declaring that this whole regime is illegitimate and that we will not stop until our single demand is met. And what is that demand? This nightmare must end. The Trump-Pence regime must go. It continues, our protests must grow day after day, night after night, thousands becoming hundreds of thousands, then millions, determined to act to put a stop to the grave danger that the Trump-Pence regime poses to the world by demanding that this whole regime be removed from power. And of course, you can read and sign it and do all that good stuff. This is crazy. I've never seen anything like this before. I'm not saying that the current regime is the best regime that we've ever had, but neither was the previous or the one before that or the one before that. They all have their faults and they all have their reasons for being open to criticism, basically. So this to me seems like just a big old, for lack of a better term, just a big pity party or something, you know, like we didn't get our way in the election, so now we're going to protest. And, you know, I understand not wanting fascism, but I don't see that necessarily is what's going on right now. But again, like I said, I've got political biases, as we all do, but this is just nuts. Again, that website is refusefascism.org, so you can check that out, read all about what they're trying to accomplish here. They've got a list here. Number 1, spread the slogans and the date far and wide. November 4th, it begins. The nightmare must end. The Trump-Pence regime must go. In the name of humanity, we refuse to accept a fascist America. Spread this using posters, stickers, flyers, chalking, light projections, banner drops, radio call-ins, social media, church bulletins, announcements at events, and much, much more. It goes on to say, distribute and publish the call for November 4th to students, religious congregations, professional organizations, and everywhere people gather. Help get out hundreds of thousands of copies of the call for November 4th. This is going to be interesting, to say the very least. I mean, we're talking about protests and gatherings more so than happened right after the election last November, possibly. It's been about a year. That's yet to be seen. At the same time, coincidentally, the U.S. government is also running an exercise from November 4th to the 6th. And this is from ARRL.org, the National Association for Amateur Radio. Came out on October 24th, and it reads, elements of the U.S. Department of Defense will conduct a communications interoperability training exercise November 4th through the 6th, once again simulating a, quote, very bad day, unquote, scenario. Amateur radio and MARS organizations will take part. Now, MARS refers to it stands for Military Auxiliary Radio System. This is directly from the ARRL site as well. Quote, this exercise will begin with a national massive coronal mass ejection event, which will impact the national power grid as well as all forms of traditional communications, including landline telephone, cell phone, satellite, and internet connectivity. That was a quote by Army Mars Program Manager Paul English. During the exercise, a designated Department of Defense headquarters entity will request county-by-county status reports for the 3,143 U.S. counties and county equivalents in order to gain situational awareness and to determine the extent of impact of the scenario. Army and Air Force Mars organizations will work in conjunction with the amateur radio community, primarily on the 60-meter interoperability channels, as well as the HF and VIS frequencies, and local VHF and UHF, not internet-linked amateur radio repeaters. Again, this year, a military station on the East Coast and the Fort Huachuca, Arizona HF station will conduct a high-power broadcast in a 60-meter channel, 5,330.5 kilohertz on Saturday from 0300 to 0315 UTC time. Now, this year will be an informational broadcast on Sunday on 13,483.5 kilohertz USB from 1600 to 1650 UTC time. Amateur radio operators should monitor these broadcasts for more information about the exercise and how they can participate in the communications exercise. Quote, "We want to continue building on the outstanding cooperative working relationship with the ARRL and the amateur radio community. We want to expand the use of the 60-meter interop channels between the military and the amateur community for emergency communications, and we hope the amateur radio community will give us some good feedback on the use of both the 5 megahertz interop and the new 13 megahertz broadcast channels as a means of information dissemination during a very bad day scenario," unquote. So, this kind of reminds me of the event that we had back in August. It was called Earth X 2017 or something to that effect. I made a video on it. So it's another exercise done by the military on what they're calling a, quote, very bad day scenario that appears to be working with amateur radio across the U.S., I guess, to kind of prepare for such an event. Whether a coronal mass ejection, which is a big thing that comes out of the sun that could affect power grids and other communication systems, whether that's actually imminent is unknown. I mean, this exercise is not saying that such a thing is going to happen, and I'm not projecting that such a thing is going to happen, but it's an event, an exercise, as the other one was back in August. Now, I just think it's kind of, what shall we say, coincidental that this is taking place at the exact same time as this fascist, anti-fascist protest, which I think they're calling, there's an acronym for it called Antifa, A-N-T-I-F-A, Antifa, which I guess stands for anti-fascism. Newsweek reporting on the same event. This came out back on the 11th of this month. The idea of Antifa, short for anti-fascism, has become a fixture in America's popular imagination in the wake of President Donald Trump's election, albeit a way that tends to have very little basis in reality. The group, which has no formal organization structure and is best defined as a tactic associated with protesting against the threat of fascism, has been falsely blamed for everything from the deadly mass shooting in Las Vegas to covert collaborations with the Islamic State militant group ISIS. Now, Antifa is apparently plotting a civil war in the United States that will begin on November 4th, according to a pervasive right-wing conspiracy theory. The story, which can be found across social media, sometimes attached to the hashtag Civil War 2017, is not only utterly fake, it's also potentially dangerous, according to a half-dozen left-wing activists who spoke to Newsweek, expressing concerns that it could inspire senseless violence from people who believe it to be true. So, in other words, Newsweek is reporting that this is totally false, that there is no November 4th protest scheduled. So I'm not sure what to take on this story. This is interesting. Further read on Newsweek, it says about a week later, YourNewsWire.com, another conspiracy website that frequently leeches off of content that first appears on InfoWars, posted another loosely sourced story with the headline, "Antifa plans civil war to overthrow Trump on November 4th. InfoWars, the famous Alex Jones channel, then returned to the content-fertile subject of Antifa-backed civil war on September 29th. I say let's just wait and see what happens here. I'm not sure what to make of this. What is actually happening on November 4th? Well, according to Newsweek, a protest is being launched by the activist group Refuse Fascism, which we already discussed, which is intended to stir a nonviolent mass movement to remove Trump from office, according to Perry Hoberman, a professor at the University of Southern California, who is a member of the group's steering committee. The idea is to mobilize people to hit the streets in a peaceful demonstration against Trump's administration, Hoberman says, stressing that it has absolutely nothing to do with starting another American Civil War. Quote, right-wingers will spin anything into anything, so Hoberman says of the Civil War conspiracy. It's just an attempt to smear anyone who isn't a fascist. So, what do you guys think? Is Civil War inevitable? Is this thing really going to blow out of control, or is it just going to be another protest that happens for a few days and passes by? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, as always, and I appreciate you watching this video. Please take time to like, share, subscribe to my channel. I appreciate all that, and please show me some love. Go over to patreon.com/AndyMichaels and become a patron to support content on this channel. That is highly appreciated. Okay, that's it for now. You guys have a great one.